Hey everybody, it's Wintermute. Welcome to the Think Tank. So I had made a video not too long ago about being able to run my kids' first tabletop RPG. Well, that happened just this last weekend, and all in all, it was a huge success. But it had some bumpy spots, and I want to talk a little bit about this. So going in, watch my previous video for some of what I had to think about with doing it with my kids, and then there was a little bit of concern about some more adult kind of morality questions that might come up. But I also had my own apprehensions. I'm not as used to Pathfinder Second Edition as I was to First Edition, which I could just run like that. I could still probably run it pretty well, because a lot of the core mechanics are still very similar. It hasn't changed since I left. But Second Edition is a stronger system overall, without a doubt, and I do prefer Second Edition. Not that it's not without its flaws, but that's another discussion. But so it's kind of a new system, but also kind of old RPG kind of problems come up. Some of this I had to take time to explain to the kids about what the difference between character knowledge and player knowledge is. And I explicitly gave them an example of, well, trolls are weak to fire and acid damage. Everybody who plays D&D or some D20 system knows that kind of just from having interacted with them. But does your player know that? You got to remember, you're trying to think like your character. So you got to keep that in mind as you're making decisions. And there were some other funny situations that kind of came up. Like descriptive flair versus game mechanics, because sometimes I would, like at one point my son shot a ray of frost at a goblin and basically rolled enough damage to get him down to 1 hit point. So I describe that damage as basically he froze his entire head in this kind of big blast of ice, and so when it settled, you could see him blinking, and he's holding and he's stumbling around with his head encased in a block of ice like this, and this guy was at 1 hit point. So, I wanted to make it kind of sound comical. But, he kind of latched onto that as literal in every sense of the term. He didn't understand that I was being more descriptive, but it really didn't have any impact on the game mechanics. And some DMs would allow it to, some generally don't. I generally try to just be descriptive and add flavor on top of the mechanics. But so that led to kind of us, having to talk about that a little bit. And some of these concepts are very abstract for the kids, and they've never really encountered them before, like skill checks. At one point, they were searching a room, and at one point, and they're telling me kind of explicitly what their characters are doing in the room. And then it's like at one point, they all basically kind of go, well, we're just going to search the whole room. Okay, great. Everybody make me a perception check. And they all made their perception checks. And then I said, okay, well, the only thing you guys find in this room is that silver bowl. That's of any value. Okay, well, here's what we do now. Now I go up to where that silver bowl was and I run my hand and okay, the only thing you find in this room is the silver bowl of any value. Of any value in this room is the silver bowl. Okay, we get that. But now we're going to go up to where that statue alcove is, and we're going to run our fingers along the edge of the alcove, and we're going to like shine the light in the corner of every. Okay, guys, the only thing you find in this room of any value is that silver bowl. Okay, no, we get that. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to that bookcase that kind of fell apart when we touched it. And I want to kind of guys, stop. Yeah, I had to realize what was going on. They didn't understand that your search check is basically encompassing all of this. And they're being they're kind of in a way stepping out of character and describing things that they would do to search a room, which is fine. But I had to explain to them that you guys got to understand that when I ask you to make that check, I'm assuming all of this is already being done. Now, if you roll low, you don't find anything. If there is anything of value, and I'm going to tell you, the only thing you find of value is that silver bowl because you've already found that. If you roll high on your perception checks and beat the DC to find whatever's hidden, if there's something hidden, then I'll tell you that there's something hidden. But otherwise, if you roll really high and there's nothing else, then I'm still going to tell you, the only thing you find of value in the room is the silver chalice. Now, of course, based on role-playing and the situation at large, there might be situations where a character explicitly says, I want to do this. Okay, well, that might have some sort of impact. But as a good DM, I know that I don't want to have the kids have this litany of everything they do when they check a room and questions they ask. And I've played with DMs that are kind of like this, and they were very much like, if you don't tell me that it happens, it doesn't happen. Okay, well, I'm going to search the room. Okay, you search the room, but that's it. But you didn't say you were doing this when you said you were searching the room. It's like, I shouldn't have to say I'm doing this. I'm just searching the room in general. I rolled relatively high. I believe I did anyway. So I'm assuming my character, no, you didn't explicitly say your character was doing all of this. It's like, no, that's a bit much. But that's kind of a common problem with role-playing games. Or a kind of a learning curve with role-playing games is how this works. And of course, every player is a little different. Every DM's a little different. So, but it was, I realized that I had to take the initiative and I had to explain the concept a little better. And again, this isn't just new players and me. It's a new DM to this system with new players and people who have never roleplayed before. But beyond that, it's also just a new group. And in a couple weeks, I may come to the decision that, you know what, these 4 players that I have really prefer the hack and slash. So that's what I'm going to give them. Or they really prefer chances to just run around and goof off with their characters and role play and kind of do weird things like that. Okay, well, that's what I'll give them. So I'm still learning the players that I'm going to be running for. And we're going to do this every other week for about 4 hours every Saturdays is tentatively the plan, so long as they stay interested. And that, and while I'm learning kind of things about them, the interesting thing is things that I learned about my own kids as we were playing, and even before we started playing. Because what I did is, out of the box, they come with 4 pre-generated characters, and I kind of described what each character kind of did: the fighter, the cleric, the rogue, and the what's the last one? Fighter, cleric, rogue, wizard. Those are the 4 core classes that you get out of the box for pre-generated characters. And I explained, wizard is this and a fighter is this. And I would have bet Thane is going to pick the fighter, and my daughter's probably going to pick the cleric, maybe the wizard. I was way off. As soon as I started explaining the wizard, Thane is like, "Yep, I want that." I'm like, okay. He really liked the idea of casting spells and things like that, as opposed to being a little more of a rough and tumble fighter type. I would not have expected that, based on kind of how he plays and his imagination and whatnot. My daughter, I would have expected her to gravitate towards the cleric. But as soon as I said, so the rogue character is a character that's very stealthy and is good at kind of moving around quietly and silently, stealing things, and she has the opportunity in combat to backstab her opponent. I want that one. She was excited. It's like as soon as I said, do extra damage to your opponents because you're sneaking around. She's like, I want that one. I'm like, I did not see that coming. I really didn't. And then when we're playing, man, every time she got to roll that sneak damage, that extra sneak die and damage, it was like she was so excited. I'm like, where did she get this bloodlust? It's not from me. I don't think it's from her mom, but she gets this weird bloodlust in this game for some reason that I did not see coming. But it was still interesting just to see them put into situations and act in ways I really didn't expect. So it was fun and enlightening for me as the dad. And then, in general, there were other things that kind of popped up about some of the players and their different personalities. My son wanted to kind of treat it a little more like Minecraft. Everything I described with a description, he wanted to go deeper into, like it had some sort of hidden meaning, or there was some useful resource to be pulled from it for some reason. And it's like, it's not like Minecraft. A mushroom on the wall, growing on the wall is decoration. It's not relevant to what's going on in the plot without me telling you that it is or indicating that it is. So, there was a little bit there's a lot of little things that kind of have to be you have to kind of shove them back on track to kind of keep them focused. In general, for the most part, they were surprisingly good. And my daughter is naturally very shy, and so she was not terribly engaged in some of the social interactions, but she was always on the ball when it came to doing knowing what she wanted to do when the time came up. And some of the other kids, I really got to take some more time with her to explain the mechanics and the rules and the dice and the numbers, because that's just, now they all kind of struggle with that a little bit. I knew going in, I was deliberately going to start off with the role play right away. I gave them all their character sheets. I let them all pick their own characters. I gave my kids first shot because I had more time with them. But I also made them, I gave them blank paper and had them make name tags for their characters to put in front of them for when they play. And already that gave them some level of investment in the character, because they got to write down their character's name and they got to do it in a way that they wanted. So my daughter's is very plain, simple, and to the point. One of the neighbor kids, she decided that it wasn't just Valeros. His nickname was Vale, so that's what we had to call him. And she a little bit of a flair. And then her sister, really put a lot of flair into that. So already they had some investment in their character, their name. It meant something to them. And I deliberately did it that way. I was going to make the name tags for them and just have them ready to go. But I'm like, no, let's let them do this. Give them something to go hands-on with, something tactile. I also gave, third edition has hero points. So I gave them actually something tactile to hold on to represent their hero points. I gave them these poker chips, and they started off with 3 each. And I almost regretted it, because that's what it sounded like for the next 5 minutes. Just nothing but poker chips hitting the table. Like, okay, guys, put your poker chips on your character sheets and leave them there for 5 minutes. Then you can touch them again, kind of a thing. But it gave them something tactile to play with, something to, I'm fidgety, so I always have to have something in my hand. So this is something that I would do for myself. Not only does it represent, not only is it something for me to kind of put my hands on, it also is something that is a good, neat representation of a facet of your character. And I think kids tend to respond to that. And it's easy for them to kind of lose some of the importance of some of these numbers when it's just on a character sheet. So I would do more things like that depending on the circumstances. So one thing I did, so all that comes together, that it was a success. They all enjoyed it. There was some learning moments, more so for me, or just as much for me as it was for them, about getting into Pathfinder 2nd edition, getting the rules right. I had to look a couple things now and again just to double check. Hold on, guys, let me double check this to make sure I'm doing it right, because I'm just not used to this yet. But for the most part, I was pretty squared away. One thing that I was really glad that I did was I did not take time to explain the rules. And every role-playing game is a little different in how they emphasize the rules. In this particular instance, it was definitely better, I feel, that I started off with the role-playing right away. I said, the rules can come later. And it's pretty basic. When a fight broke out, it's like, okay, everybody look at your perception score. You're going to roll what's called initiative. You're going to roll a d20, add your perception score to that, and then you're going to tell me what you rolled, and I'm going to make a list, and that's the order everybody's going to go in. And then when it rolled around to a player, okay, you've got 3 actions. You have that little cheat sheet in here with all the basic actions that came with the starter box. So your most basic of action is to strike. That's 1 action. It was very brief when I described it. And then basically what I would do is I'd say, okay, it's your turn, Arya. What do you want to do? Well, I want to definitely take out that guy because he's threatening the wizard. Okay. Here's your options. And I walked them, and I didn't go through every option, because there's a lot of options in combat with Pathfinder 2nd edition. A lot. And that's one of the things I like about it. But I said, well, what you can do is you are hiding right now from last round. So what you can do is you can step out from behind the pillar, throw the dagger. He's flat-footed to you. You'll get your sneak attack damage. So you take an action to step out. You take a strike action to attack with the dagger. Okay. It does a successful dodge. Okay, you've got 1 action left. What do you want to do now? Now you can kind of set up thinking about what you want to do next turn. And I just let them tell me what they wanted to do, and then where they wanted to end, and I kind of walked them through the options to get to that point. So that I think was a great idea on my part to do it that way. It kept them engaged, kept them thinking, and it didn't burden them with too many rules. Because I've done this before with board games where it's just I throw out all the rules and they just sort of go, oh, can we start rolling dice? And some board games you can do that with. You can just start rolling dice and then let it kind of organically develop. I think Katana's kind of like that. You could just kind of, okay, we'll make this decision here now, and it will have some implication. The first game, it just kind of unfolds, and then by the time you're done, they got a pretty good idea. Well, you wouldn't think it would be that easy with a role-playing game, especially one that's a little crunchy, or quite crunchy like Pathfinder, but it turned out to work out really well. So I was really happy with that. And of course, there were things that after the fact, I went, oh, you know what? I should have handled that fight differently. I could have given them a better challenge if I'd done this instead with the giant spider because he had this ability. Okay, so there's also a learning curve for me as well as I'm doing this. And that was the other thing. My girlfriend couldn't play. She was just way too sick. And then one of the other neighborhood kids couldn't play. So it was basically me and 4 brand new players, the oldest of which is 12. So I was definitely a little apprehensive about that. But everything worked really smoothly, as it turns out. They all really enjoyed it. And starting off with the role-playing was a big reason I think that was successful. So I can't emphasize that enough when you're playing with newer people. We didn't have to worry about character creation. And even at one point, they all kind of asked, well, you can make your own character. Oh yeah, there's a whole set of rules for that. But in this instance, we're just learning it. So that's something we could do. If we decide to do this long term, we can all sit around one night and do that. And oh, cool. So it's something to look forward to that they want to do rather than being burdened by all these rules that don't make any sense and trying to worry about getting into their character's head pre-game and all this other stuff. Now, just here's a character, and let's just start role-playing. We can ad hoc it, make it up as the time comes. And I even made it a point to have extra role-playing before we got into the crunchy rule stuff and the combats. Because I've already seeded 2 other possible plot directions for a Chapter 2 once this adventure wraps up, of my own design if they want it. One revolving around the mayor and why he's insistent that he doesn't have the troops to take care of this problem because he's more worried about the radical druids, worried about the logging getting out of hand on the outskirts of the city because it's a logging city. That's what its main export is. So that's plot point 1 that they can choose to follow up on, and then another plot point is a crazy old person who walked around and he walks up to the party with this crazy, says something very weird, acts very bizarre around them, and then some townsfolk kind of usher him away. No, don't mind him. He's a little touched. He used to be members of one of the families that founded this town, but in his elder age, he got a little touched. But we watch out for him. But don't take anything he says literally. Well, turns out he gave his statement of, as bizarre as it sounded, gave the players a clue that could help them out in this dungeon for reasons. And the kids have already kind of picked up that there might be something important about him. Otherwise, why would I mention him? So, kids can be surprisingly smart sometimes. But at the same time, you can overdo it, because there was another instance where the kobolds that they had to deal with suckered them in. Well, they were trying to make peace with the kobolds and like, look, we don't really want to fight you. Here, maybe we can bribe them. Give me a gold piece. And we can bribe them to just let us pass in peace. Well, the kobolds were suckering them. They're emboldened. They think they've got all the upper hands because of reasons. So they sucker, and the one kobold in the lead just sort of fell to the ground so the others could get a clear shot with their spears at the lead character doing it, or trying to do the social interaction at that point. They didn't pick up on what was going on, until I explained it to them afterwards. It's like, well, think about it. It's like, oh yeah, we'll take your gold piece, yeah. And then he just drops to the ground. Nothing is between him or you and the other guys. And as soon as he's out of the way, they chuck their spears at you and all get a round of free attacks at you while you're flat-footed because you didn't see it coming. So it's funny because they picked up that, oh, that's probably an important thing. But then something that I thought was kind of obvious, that they were getting suckered, it went right over their heads. So, don't treat them like they're stupid all the time, but sometimes you got to make sure that you're helping them out and explaining things maybe a little more thoroughly than you might expect with kids. So it was a lot of fun. I know there was a lot of rambling here. It wasn't the most coherent video I've ever made, but I'm glad that it worked out. I'm happy it worked out. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about moving forward with kids. One thing I will say is getting back into Pathfinder has opened up a lot of lessons that I've learned previously being a dungeon master and a player, that I think are worth sharing in general with the gaming community, and some ways that I did things differently in the past that I think are still applicable. So I'm going to do some more videos about certain topics that I think are relevant, and kind of put some ideas out there for the community as a whole, and possibly ways that could be incorporated into games, that I would like to see the direction certain role-playing games go, because I think it would be a better way of doing it overall. I think it at least works for me. So anyway, for right now, this is Wintermute, still riding high on a happy game, on a successful game. So yeah. I will keep you guys abridged if any major developments happen within the game. Wintermute out.